Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I'm going to be teaching you all about modern slavery and the slave class. In case you didn't know there were such things, as many Americans seem to think that slavery was something that happened in America up until the mid-1800s. But slavery has always been going on, and today it's going on more than ever. And now black people in America who ignore the fact that slavery in Africa never stopped want some of us white Americans to pay reparations for slavery that neither we nor our ancestors ever committed against black people. And there are cultures where black people have enslaved white people too historically, namely the Muslims. But all of this slavery that I'm talking about now refers to just one type of slavery, which is forced labor slavery. There are other forms of slavery too, such as voluntary sex slavery as practiced in BDSM, and involuntary sex slavery, such as in sex trafficking, which again goes on more today than ever before. And yes, even in the USA, prison work programs are just good old-fashioned labor camps, and corrupt politicians like Kamala Harris are really just human traffickers and slave drivers sending any able-bodied men they can to go produce for pennies, even extending their sentences just to get more labor out of them. Prisons are just private sector businesses that make good profits off of legal slave labor. And God forbid that any of us physically strong men ever get sent to some jail on some trumped up charges like having to defend ourselves against a woman who's attacking us, because the US puts as many people to work for it as it can. It has the largest prison population in the world. But however, slavery goes beyond even these known common forms. There's actually an entire class of people who are living in slavery and do not even know it. This is what I call the slave class, and it is quite large. You see, too many economies and too much of the world's trade and economics depended upon slavery historically. So when countries started abolishing forced slave labor, the powers that be, who were profiting so much off of it, wanted to find ways around the law. This could be through just disobeying it, or legal loopholes like calling it indentured servitude or apprenticeships, or on a much grander scale, by creating an entire economic marketplace with them at the bottom as the whole foundation and thinking that they are free agents, but for them being forced to live in debt and thus a form of indentured servitude for 65 or now 67 years. You see, there are not actually three classes, as everyone has been made to think, with themselves at the middle. And studies have shown that everyone thinks that they are middle class, just about. But there is not an upper, lower, and middle class. There are only two classes: the owners and the workers. Or in other words, the lords and the serfs. The lands have changed, but the structure remains the same. Most people are still part of a serf class, living on borrowed land, in debt to the state and various institutions through student loans, mortgages, credit cards, and other loans in debt. And then with things such as credit scores and laws to control you, and taxes to make you productive for the state which you are a citizen of. Not by choice, of course, but nonetheless, you are now forced to live and work in and pay taxes to, whether you like it or not. So the paradigm remains the same. Everyone in it who wasn't born into the elite property-owning class are all just slaves. You could tell because public education curriculum has been designed using social engineering based upon prison cell block structure. This is why in school, intellectualism and free thinking are discouraged, insubordination is punished, and children are programmed and conditioned with the skills that it takes to be an efficient worker bee, and for the types of positions the government wants. This is why public schools produce a populace of mostly NPCs, what I'll be talking about in the next video. The alternative rock band from the 90s called Rage Against the Machine mentions that school curriculum is the same as a cell block in their song Down Rodeo. But it wasn't put on the radio, and no one seems to have listened. And then, for some reason, politically rebellious bands like that seem to have been silenced altogether because there haven't been any in the mainstream since then. None that I've heard of, and I'm a musician, so looking for new music is one of my things that I do. And the state has its ways of silencing rebels, for the government is a very big and powerful entity, like a god. And the other powers that be are like so many other powerful deities. and the populace of the slave class beneath them is just like livestock to them, and is overwhelmed by their power, and unable to resist their many arms that they can use as controlling forces, like the military, which can easily overtake any threat, especially from civilians. And so the government and powers that be have the ability to oppress the slave class, and that is what it always has done and always will do. That is, until the slaves get sick of it and decide to stand up for themselves finally, which we can do at literally any time. For the power they have over us is only the power that we give them. All we would have to do is stop voting with our dollars and our feet for institutions that oppress us and drop out of the system that it has created for us. We can vote differently. We can change what we pay taxes for. We can change government policy and spending. We can go on strike and force entire organizations to change and stop treating us like slaves. In fact, the entire power and force that the government has to use to suppress any rebellion is only effective if people don't present a unified front against it. However, if we do, we outnumber government officials 5,000 to 1. As we saw on January 6th, all it takes is a coming together of bodies to show the government that we, the people, are the country. And if we rise up all at once, there will be no stopping us. Just as Spartacus and the other slaves found out during the 3 servile wars in ancient Rome, when the slaves rose up and rebelled and waged war against their masters and the entire slave state. And we can do the same literally any time we want, without even having to fight, since most of us aren't living in forced labor camps. We just have to vote with our actual votes as well as our money and our feet. And our words too, like I'm doing here. Are you sure to take your daily dose of red pills consistently so that you can stay out of the matrix? The red pill is a medicine that only works if you take it in the right dosage and never miss a dose. One missed dose of red pills can mean turning back into a blue-pilled limp dick simp under the sharp heel of the evil feminist matriarchy. So make sure you are subscribed and that your subscription is set to all so that you never have to miss one of your daily doses of the red pill, because I'm releasing hot new red pill content every single fucking day just to make sure you don't have to. So make sure you will actually get notified when they are released, because you know that YouTube doesn't want to show you things that don't align with its liberal leftist feminazi agenda, and it shadow bans content creators like me who use free speech to speak out against these politics and stand up for the rights of the oppressed masses of men like you and me. And if you want to help me keep fighting the good fight, please donate using the PayPal link below so that I can keep this work alive, because I simply cannot do it without the support of viewers like you. And be sure to spread these messages and share these videos with any other men you know who could use a nice big dose of red pills. We have to start getting out and participating in politics and changing public policy and fighting for our rights, because women aren't going to do it for us. It's up to us men. And I know a lot of you out there don't want to get involved in politics because you find it boring or frustrating or a waste of time and energy or whatever. But this is just one of those things a grown adult man has to do, like working. So you are going to just have to put on your big boy pants and do it. That is, if you don't want to be treated like government livestock your whole life. And it's like Plato once said, those who refuse to participate in politics end up being governed by those who are inferior to them. Just as how slaves who used to work on plantations or farms in dozens or even hundreds would be doing work that would make them incredibly fit, while the master, who would sit on his porch governing them all day, would get fat and slow. And so these slaves not only outnumbered their masters, but they had the physical capabilities to overpower them at any time. They just chose not to, because they had resigned their will over to him. And today, the same thing happens with men like us getting trapped in dead-end jobs that barely pay the bills, working for some corporate fat cat who is basically just an NPC worker drone with money and power now, And you end up getting an inferiority complex because here you are having to eat shit from some stupid, stubborn old man who lives in an ivory tower and has no idea what it's like to have to actually do work for his own company. And I think that is one of the things that is making modern men so mentally ill and causing this crisis of masculinity. The fact that intellectual, independent thinkers are forced to have to work these mundane, menial jobs that are mind-numbing, and then, on top of that, you have to eat shit from superiors who don't even seem like they are fit to be your superiors. And yet they are. In spite of oftentimes being stupid, weak old men, you get placed beneath them and have to take whatever kind of shit they want to dish out to you in spite of actually being a much lesser person than you. But that is the system we live in, and it is meant to be that way. It is meant to be disheartening to free thinkers and discouraging towards independence and dumbing down of intelligence and intellect. It is meant to promote not those people, but the people who are the biggest conformists and NPCs and corporate drones out there. And it is meant to make us slaves to the system and keep us in slavery for life until we can't work anymore, and then provide us with the bare minimum after that and give us barely enough to keep us healthy and alive for however many years you can cling to life on the meager scraps you'll be left with. And with all the tax dollars we pay, us men barely get provided for. Who gets provided for? The politicians and the bureaucrats and government agents. And women, when they need welfare programs. But not us men. And our government here in America has a vast reserve of taxpayer dollars that it allocates mostly not to aid in its most hard-working citizens with their well-being and livelihood. No, it mostly goes to pay the salaries of government agents and to the military and wars like the Ukraine war that we are in right now, even though we shouldn't be, and any other wars the liberals are waging, using the indentured servitude of our most heroic and patriotic male soldiers, of course, basically another form of slavery, for a soldier has to obey orders. Otherwise, he could get shot by his superior. And those soldiers and government agents are all brainwashed with the morality of following orders for the greater good of the state, even if it means oppressing their own citizens, including spraying their own civilians with tear gas for peaceful protests, in spite of it not even being legal to do as an act of war against another country. That's right, tear gas is banned by the Geneva Convention. Why? Because it's fucking deadly. But our own government routinely uses it on its own population simply for peacefully protesting. If that is not evidence that we aren't really free, I don't know what is. But why is it that when we have the power and the numbers, the government is able to oppress us and keep us in a slave class? They aren't doing it with force and whips like in the days of old. They're doing it with our social conditioning and cultural programming. In other words, brainwashing. They do it by creating a slave mentality in everyone so that people actually subject themselves to slavery rather than the government having to force them into it physically. Every aspect of our cultural conditioning is meant to create conformity and obedience to the norms and customs that the government has instilled in our culture. People are now subjecting themselves to the life of a slave willingly because of the fact that they have been imbued with the mind of a slave ever since their early development. And anyone who doesn't have this mindset and doesn't conform is so rare that they seem to be crazy to everyone else. Someone like me can speak out, but no one listens. I've been called crazy my whole life for speaking out against the norms. Earlier, I mentioned how we outnumber the government officials 5,000 to 1, but they don't have to worry about that because people generally don't stand up for themselves and act out against the government and its programs except for in small numbers, often just one or a few at a time like I'm doing. And so the government greatly outnumbers them and can easily silence them or even make them just fucking disappear. And so you see, we are only able to be oppressed when we do not have a unified front and sense of togetherness. This is probably why American education stresses individuality and things like stranger danger, causing low social trust. But it is only through coming together that we have any chance at overcoming our oppressors and achieving true freedom. And together we can. Just as Spartacus in the Servile Wars, it doesn't matter how lowly our position in society. Even if you are a slave, if you come together in a unified front, you can rise up against your oppressors and fight back. And that is what we should be doing in every way possible. So please join me in this movement and help me spread these messages to empower other men like us in this anti-male age. Let us all stop bowing down to slave masters like women. Stand up for yourselves and fight for your rights with me. Live like a man, not a slave. Stand up, speak out, and go your own way, men.
That concludes this video. Thanks for listening. I hope I mansplained that good enough for you. If you like what you heard, please click the like button. And if you feel you gained some value from this video and would like to give some back, please do so with the PayPal link below, because your support helps fund me doing this work and fight the good fight for men like you. If you are ready to take the red pill and wake up from the matrix and the matriarchy controlling it and learn everything you need to know about female on male sexism, get your copy of my newly released book called Misandry Exposed. On sale now for a special price that won't last long. So check it out by clicking the link below. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.